So just wanted to welcome everyone to our seminar, monthly seminar. It's the second time we've done a joint seminar with community research and one of our longtime members with Bev. So we're really excited. And I know there's these are always very well attended. We had an excellent one last year. So I want to thank you all on behalf of both the Migration Research Network and your co-hosts are here, all of us, and also for community research for attending this session on unpacking the community research code of practice. So for those of you who don't know Bev, she is a social policy and community researcher, works across a range of portfolios and is the ethnic research engagement lead at community research, formerly involved with Chinese community initiatives in Aotearoa and beyond. She has a strong focus on the approaches to strengthen and affirm positive social values and et cetera. And so beyond being a member of this network of a wide range of experiences across the community here, and so we're really looking forward to learning from you and engaging with you today, Bev. So I want to not waste any more time and hand it over to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tim, and thanks, Tim and Kayatri and Arzu for this opportunity to work jointly again together. We're very excited about this webinar. It's something I've been wanting to progress for years actually, and so to have the opportunity with community research, but especially to have this joint webinar as a broader audience to kick this off is really fantastic. So what I'm going to start off with is I'm going to share the screen because I think one of the things that when we talk about community research is, so what is community research? And there are many different ways of thinking about it. So I'm just going to share screen, which is this one, I think. And ask you all, if you wouldn't mind, just completing a wee form. So it asks you to just share one word that comes to mind when you think of the term community research. So Tim, if you can give me a sense of when peeps may have done that, because I can't see the audience based on my view.
So you're wanting them to do it at the link, though, not in the chat.
Is it not showing on the, I have shared.
No, we can see it. I wouldn't be able to tell when people are done.
Okay.
A couple people have dropped it into the chat, but
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to give peeps another couple of minutes and then we're just going to have a look at some of the responses. That's probably the easiest way to do this.
I've also just I've dropped the link in the chat. So if it's easier, if people don't have a camera ready and it's easier to get the link, you can visit the link through the chat.
Hmm. Okay, here we go. So this is live responses that you're hopefully seeing. Is that coming up on the screen, Tim? Fabulous. Because I think I recognized when I was starting to create this presentation that the code of conduct that's been written really defines what community research is. But is that how we see it as people working in this space? So I thought it would be a great way of starting it by just seeing what were the key words that people thought of when and associated with community research. And then we can come back to have a think about these at the end. So the size of the word reflects the number of people who have used it as their response. So definitely this focus on a collaborative endeavour, a collective endeavour, people and engagement, the need for grassroots and inclusiveness. Again, this collaboration with co-design, inclusiveness, uplifting, horizontal, trust, genuine. That's fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is move on to the presentation itself, and we can come back and see whether we feel that these sorts of things have been captured with the code of practice and some of the aspects to date. Now, so guys, I've done this exercise in a person-to-person conference, so I'm going to click X and wonder whether we get back to the presentation. Maybe not. Should we go to here? Here. Great, excellent. Right, so first I thought I'd start off with just talking a little bit about who community research is. So we're a community organisation, began in 2007, was traditionally the tangata whenua community and voluntary sector organisation, and began very much from with a focus around kaupapa Māori and valuing te ao Māori and kaupapa Māori methods of doing research and evaluation. And from there, over the last almost 20 years now, there's been a focus on sharing and disseminating the knowledge through webinars. We've got a special collection around different focused areas such as housing. There's one around the ethnic community here, From Us Not About Us. Webinars such as this. We have podcasts, we have Te Tiriti resource pages. So if you haven't ever visited our website, I encourage you to. So that was, so then who am I? I'm the Kaituhono Ethnic Research Engagement Lead. So that role was originally trialled with Bartfula Reef, who started off the first tautoko sessions and then continued. There was a decision to continue it as a role within community research in 2024, and I began in March last year. And since then, we've run tautoko sessions and started to have a network emerge in the ethnic former refugee migrant researchers space. And so we have a dedicated every 2 months get together, and that's either to have a speaker in an informal, unrecorded, sort of about engaging in the space. But also we have other sessions which are like speed networking sessions where peeps get into breakout rooms with a couple of other people to just connect. I mentioned the special collections, I mentioned the webinars. We're currently working on a podcast series, which we hope to release I think we decided May, June next year, and that's around connection of Te Tiriti and ethnic communities, across ethnic communities. There's What Works resource mahi and a separate website which community research hosts, and the code of practice work, which is what I'm going to talk about today. So I was really, I actually didn't know about the code of practice when I started at community research in March. And prior to that, I'd been doing some mahi, and one of the things that we'd expressed was the need for a community research code of practice. This was specifically in the ethnic communities space, that were there a set of standards or guidance for undertaking community research with ethnic communities as part of ethnic communities. And so this set of standards and practice was developed in 2007. It was set up to describe the optimal practices in community research. community research has its unique set of contexts and challenges, and every time it's a bit different. And so it's one of the korero that actually that we had in terms of thinking about the community research library and collections, that if the standard from the code of practice was the benchmark, there would be very few pieces of research there because of the practical nature of power dynamics, time, resourcing, a whole range of things. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be aspiring to these optimum practices and that we should be transparent about those we can, um, how we have, and those we can connect with, and those things which we haven't been able to connect with. However, at the same time, I think there are some specific elements within it, so that they're around, say, benefit to communities in doing a piece of community research. It may not be maximized benefit because of a whole lot of contextual things, but I think there are touchstones throughout the code which it's important to consider and to think about when undertaking community research. So what does the code look like? So this is the Community Research Code of Practice. It's literally 5 pages. And what it does is it's centered around 5 whanaungatanga, rangatiratanga, manaakitanga, kotahitanga, and embedded. So this repackaging happened in 2020 when there was a further work done to think about the 2007 document and make it more framed around ways of working in the PO. That was a more focused, I suppose, set of guidelines to be able to think about doing our mahi. So what I'm going to do for the remainder of this webinar is talk through just at quite a high level each of the PO, give some examples of things which I've had in my mind that thinking that, oh, that probably aligns with this space in terms of tools or sort of practice frameworks out there. And just bearing in mind, being right up front here, I'm not an academic in this space. I'm not a, I haven't been looking at, what are the practices or what are the tools and resources that we can use for sort of supporting a community research code of practice. This is the very sort of quite initial start of the journey in doing this piece of work. And I think one of the key things in going forward is actually having an approach which brings together us as a community of practice to develop it up together and hopefully provide some case studies and illustrations and examples of things that have gone well, but also some of the barriers and challenges and frustrations in doing community research. So just to start off with, what I've done is I've done some little highlighting because it can be quite wordy to think about. So whanaungatanga, very much about relationships, principled relationships, and that's in recognizing that communities, they are, the core actually of the research. I think of community research very much as a collaborative endeavor, that the relationship is about ensuring that there is that connection, that it is of benefit to communities, that there are no surprises for communities in being involved in the research. So that's actually about authenticity in the relationship. And by authenticity, I mean not showing up as a researcher who has these skill sets and knowledge, but turning up as a community researcher who is there with their full person. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. Practicing in a culturally competent manner. And some of the things that I've been seeing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, is the word competent and competence, because that's broken out a bit further into thinking a bit more around cultural reflexivity, big words, I know, it's always big words, cultural humility, and actually creating the cultural safe space. And then communities having the right to determine how, who, why their knowledge is collected and how it will be used. So all these things really frame around a kororo actually about power and power imbalances in terms of what's the frame of reference for how this research is undertaken. Is it a traditional, I'm going to say use the word traditional Western kind of approach to thinking about knowledge and how the research has progressed? Is it privileging that community's way of knowing, being, doing, and seeing? And community research is about the latter. And if that latter can't happen because of resourcing and funding, it's about being transparent about that. So I'm sure you may have comments and thoughts about this as we go through. So at the end, I'm really, really interested in hearing what thoughts and insights you guys have got. So a lot of you will have come across this term of positionality, which is who am I as a researcher? What do I bring, not just in terms of skills and knowledge and ability to do research tasks, but as a person. So just as a quick exercise, some of the things which may be relevant your gender and sexuality, partner family status, age, ethnicity, migrant status, and of course it all relates to what your project is. But there are things which have influenced the way you think and what you bring to bear and how you relate to to the communities that you're working with. So I specifically wore these glasses today because they're the same glasses as in the picture. So as an example, for myself, things that are of relevance is that I'm Cantonese Chinese, which is distinct from Mandarin speaking Chinese, and which is distinct from, there's a whole diversity often within a community. So it's useful to sort of articulate what space you're coming from. I'm born in Aotearoa. I'm actually fourth generation New Zealand, Chinese New Zealander. I'm oldish. We won't go any further on that one. Single mum with a young adult son, speak English. Some might be a bit of an exaggeration. I speak a bit to some, te reo Māori, and I'm relearning Cantonese. So I think the positionality, and you may have seen in some research reports now, you have a positionality at the beginning, helps to frame who you are and what you brought to this mahi. Another thing that element that I was talking about just before is the cultural safety kind of aspect. So that's was first developed back in 1990 and has been part of the progression, I guess, in thinking about cultural competency and humility and safety in the public health space. And in particular, in the nursing education sort of space with, I know I'm looking up the name now, Dr. Ramsden and colleagues, and they prepared a resource for the Nursing Council. And I think one of the conversations happening in one of the other publications that I was reading the other day is how do we ensure that even if you've got these frameworks which talk about thinking about who you are and what privilege you might have had in the past, but also what experiences that connect you with those communities, that in thinking about cultural safety, it doesn't end up being just a surface level of recognizing that, oh yeah, people are diverse and we need to try and make sure we cater to that diversity. And that comes back more to the cultural competency angle of I can navigate this space without offending anyone. That's a little bit different when we come to thinking about cultural reflexivity, humility, and safety, because that brings yourself into the into consideration about in terms of, I'd say, so what are my background experiences in terms of how I would understand or think about or talk to whatever the research focus is and the community that I'm working with. And in acknowledging that, what that starts to do is it means that you, I guess, have a better sense of where you are standing, your place to stand in that authentic relationship with the communities that you're working with, and an openness to acknowledge and work with them, recognizing that, there are differences and that we bring to bear in the relationship and the way that we're going to move our work forward. Connected to that, I'm sure many of you will have come across intersectionality as a concept. So this is the intersectionality wheel from the United Nations Women's Group and their intersectionality resource guide and toolkit. Just as a get-go, one of the things, I'm not sure why they start at infancy, why they don't start at conception in terms of intersectionality, because there's all sorts of, dimensions at play from childbirth or even conception to childbirth to infancy. So intersectionality is a way of thinking about the multiple social identities that we have, and that it's not just one identity that influences and is the experience of how society, how community, how institutions operate in terms of power and privilege and oppression. I think one of the things to bear in mind with this sort of space, which I have, heard in conversations and read a bit about, is the potential for it to be a deficit-oriented kōrero, and that we need to ensure that when we focus in the community research space, I think we need to ensure that we are always operating on a solutions-based focus, that we understand and embrace that broader influence, so that communities and the way that they operate and how things are currently is due to those past influences. It's not due to, rather than just honing in on that community and the research findings for it on its own. I don't think I'm being very clear here. Prior's 7 principles. So I had a look to see, well, are there principles around using intersectionality as a way of framing, contribution to framing for research? And the one that was commonly referenced, and again, this is mahi and setting the scene for the projects, hopefully, that we'll be able to progress, was this one, and they decided that they would get very excited about repeated use of the letter R. So reciprocity, we must value and engage with others, other ways of knowing than our own. So that's a reference to different ways of knowing, being, doing, and seeing across different communities. Relationality, all of creation is interdependent and interconnected in complex and sometimes antagonistic ways. So yes, this is very complex jargon. So it's basically saying that, it's that hands thing where you weave your hands together and things are connected up. And some things have positive and some things not so positive and create tensions. Reflexivity, continuing to examine the significance of their positions within existing power relationships. Respect, ensuring there is a respect of difference. Reverence, and that's around spiritual values and practices. Responsivity, knowledge systems are fluid and responsive to change. So that actually, like if we're thinking about the diaspora communities in Aotearoa, they're not only diverse, but they're changing over time through different generations and through just, adapting and connecting across different cultural mores. Responsibility, research should further social justice and well-being. So there's two different elements or aspects, I think, in terms of intersectionality. One is ensuring that we are thinking about these different social identities that people can have when we're actually doing our research, so that we're not ignoring that people have these diverse identities. Having said that, it is hard to cover maybe being able to include that voice in research at times due to resources and all sorts of other reasons. But I think at a minimum, it's like an acknowledgement that that's either further mahi to be done, and that there are differences in how life is experienced when you may have multiple layers of different oppression or different discrimination that's occurring in your lives. And those solutions need to be, yeah, taking that into account as well. So now I'm going to shift to rangatira, and I'm going to, oops, see that my time is rapidly running. So what I've done is just underline some of those things. So rangatiratanga is about governance, decision making, te tiriti o Waitangi, and situating the community mahi in Aotearoa, collective research ownership. And I think repeatedly throughout this is that idea of relationships, power, decolonizing knowledge. And what that refers to is privileging the knowledge base or knowledge approach of the community that you're working with. And that's about their lived experience. That's about their pathways and journeys. So it may not be about Western Māori Pacifica. It may actually be to do about a way of knowing, being, doing, and seeing from a disabilities community space. So I'm talking about different ways of knowing, being, doing from a very broad frame of reference. What I've just done here is noted a framework that was presented by Nanawi Hupana and Dr. Chelsea Groupfield, which I have always had in the back of my mind as a foundational way of thinking about the power dynamic of conducting research. And it's about 6 minutes and 30 seconds into the webinar. It's one of the webinars that Community Research has in its library. And it's that idea of the power dynamic of who is deciding what the research project looks like and who does the research and all those aspects. And if we think about in the past, that concept that research was done to Māori, right? So government would create a research project and they'd get Māori research participants. And yeah, and then the concept went to, oh, we're doing it for Māori and then with Māori. But actually the aspiration is for Māori to do research as Māori. So the difference is that when it's done by Māori, there still may be that dictated worldview, Western, to in terms of the research methodologies, in terms of how you measure outcomes, in terms of fitting in with a certain frame of reference. As Māori is one which privileges Māori ways of knowing, being, doing, seeing across the board. So the aims are as Māori within a Māori worldview. I'm just going to stop on that one now. Go to next slide. So manaakitanga relates to building off what I've just said, privileging community values, reciprocity, and I think that care in terms of communities benefiting from the research, that you're not using a deficit model, that you're working with communities in a way which doesn't leave them disempowered, basically. And that connects to strength-based, solution-focused, and thinking about how the results are written up, how research is shared. And again, it's done in a way where you're working with the communities. Again, these are optimal. Standards and codes of practice. So I've just put a few down there of those that are around. And I think I've included the beginnings around generative AI because I think that's a really important space as well that needs to be engaged with when working with communities. Quite a few of them are data oriented. One of the key ones around connecting with communities is the CARE principles, which was developed by the global, I'm going to maybe get the words the wrong way around, Global Indigenous Governance Group, of which the Māori Data Sovereignty Group and Iwi Data Group were involved. And that's around that, again, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And I think one of the things that also, just from my own work experience, is that there's not one set way to do things. And even within working within, say, a Māori community research space, there will be different points of view as to how you might go about doing something. And an example I'm going to give is just some survey work that I did, working as part of a bigger project. And what we did is because it was working with rangatahi men, we decided that given the difficulties of getting engagement in surveys and the lack of trust, it was actually a commissioned government piece of research that this was part of, that we would make the survey anonymous. And so we got responses and they were anonymously provided. So when it was reviewed, and that was working with Māori researchers in that. But then when it was reviewed, the comment was made, it should never have been anonymous because then you can't remove their data from your data set if they ask for it to be removed. So yeah, there is kind of the balancing act. I guess we could have put unique tags and done all that sort of stuff, but then if you're saying it's anonymous, in my mind, it's anonymous. So it's just an illustration of how you need to work with communities, you need to connect with those that have that breadth of experience in order to inform how you might move forwards on projects and focus on how you're doing things. Just the final two, because I am conscious of time. Kotahitanga, again, benefiting from research in constructive ways, the sustainability, the survival of good ideas and ways to generate growth or positive progress, community-led dissemination, and thinking about how community interests may be impacted by the research beyond the formal research conclusion. So I think we've talked about that quite a lot in the different elements building to this, but it is about that idea of not doing, in my mind, it's saying don't do research for the sake of research. Don't do research because I'd like to know about, or wouldn't it be good to know about? Connect with communities and find out what would be helpful to know about, and also in a way where there's an understanding about what the outcomes of that research will show and how that might be managed. And I think that's a really important aspect of community research. And that's why it's about relationships. It's not a transactional, oh, here are the findings and it shows that this isn't going well. It's a relationship about, okay, so given these findings, here are some of the solutions that were brought up as well. Or now that goes into the big whanonga that we'd already arranged as part of thinking about these research results. So it's just ensuring it's not a disempowering deficit model, but also that the mahi that's done, if there are good ideas and useful knowledge, that that can be visible and that can be shared so it doesn't get lost and then the same piece of work needing to be done or that connection with government about what the space is needs to be done. And I think one of the enduring aspects is that idea around how does community-led knowledge connect with spheres of influence in policy at local level, at central level. And I think that's part of where, community research ourselves, we need to do a bit more work on how we can leverage together to actually put that in the face of decision makers. And I think there's some amazing mahi that I've seen especially in the last 2 or 3 years, with the Ethnic Health Collective, with the CARE conference, and with the upcoming conference in November by AUT, with the Wero work, with the Science Challenge. I mean, there's some really strong things going forward, and it's helping to build that momentum and ensuring that the smaller projects as well connect up to the larger ones. Embedded, and that comes right back to include communities and connect communities throughout the whole research process. And in a way, in my mind, if for useful and successful community research, if you don't do so, then you do at your own peril that you're going to ask the wrong questions, try and engage in the wrong ways, and nobody's going to engage, or you'll put out your recruitment thing and people won't volunteer to be involved because you need that trust, you need that authenticity and credibility as a community researcher, so someone who has the interests of the community at heart to do justice to it as a piece of work. and also, bearing in mind that, yeah, it's that volunteering of time and participating in research like that you're undertaking, which means that there needs to be that authenticity. So that was my blurb. I know I spoke really quickly to overview the code of practice. What are the two projects that we're thinking of doing? So I'm just going to really, really briefly talk to the two projects, which we're right at the start of commencing. Um, the first one is a scoping project, and that's around, is it useful to create a training or resource for the code of practice? And this is just scoping. Should we thinking about doing such a thing at community research? Why would you want to do something like that? Um, why would community research want to provide training about the code? So I'm being very, right back to where's the balancing of that relationship, because community research has a relationship with community researchers and associated organisations. Who should be the target? What would be the training level? Who could be involved in developing it? We've talked about, is it something that should be positioned that can align with, NZQA and academic kind of level courses? And then we talk about community research is about knowledge, in its broadest sense, coming from communities, and maybe too much connection with academia as such means that it gets an elitist feeling, and we actually miss out on what some of the core aspects of community research are if we offer it linked to universities or tertiary education. So what sort of approach should be hybrid, online, group online? How can we make it sustainable, and what are the different educational contexts? One of the benefits that we've talked about in community research for this would be really about visibility, credibility, and for community research as a way of creating and documenting and presenting knowledge. Because when there's a standard or a code of practice, our thinking is that it is viewed differently. And I don't know whether that's, again, it's a balancing act. So that's hence we're doing this scoping exercise. And so we're hoping to start before the end of the year. We've got some opportunities that we've just sort of started discussing where there are forums or hui happening, or peeps who can help connect us up for some group discussions, say at government level or in other levels, around what could be the value, would be the value, and how might it be useful going forwards. Finally, just need to click along here. The Awhiawhi pilot project. So this is a pilot project, and it's about unpacking the code of practice from an ethnically diverse communities lens. So it's the idea of having a series of workshops, Awhiawhi, to explore the code, what it means in practice, share some ideas about existing tools, guides, and methods that are useful, hopefully identify some case studies or examples in practice, and potentially create some additional resources about how to implement it. We're thinking that we'll have a first session planned for late September, and at that first session, we'll review and think about, is this the best way to run a project like this? Are there other ways that we might be able to connect and develop our unpacking a code of practice? So this is a pilot. We're focusing in the researchers in the former refugee, migrant, and ethnic space, with the idea that if this works in terms of being useful, and I think actually the Awhiawhi or whatever process we use in itself will be useful in terms of sharing ideas and that, then a similar exercise could be done coming from different other community lenses. And that then would build up the resources around the code of practice. And I just really like, a really heartfelt thank you to everyone, Ngāhi for coming along, because we're right at the start, and it's really important to have this kōrero if we're going to create something or put energy into something which has value or usefulness at the end. And it may be that it is that the code needs to be totally rethought. It may be that there isn't a code needed, but just a page with resource links for different things. But yeah, we'd love it for people to engage in the kōrero going forward as we develop these projects up. So shall I put up the slide for the final? Well, I might just read it out,
Sure.
and we can finish from there. Kua mutu a mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā, manaakitanga mai, mātou katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, aio ki te arangi. Our work has finished for the time being. Protect us all, our friends, our family. Peace to the universe. Ka kite, kia ora. Thanks again, everyone.